We are live here tonight with Renters Radio Boston. New name, same faces. Up right now.
I was going to say, to have some fun, bring it local. Do you want to talk about rent control?
Let's talk about rent control.
Man, Herb, do you have the audio?
Yes, I do.
All right. Now, I wish I knew this woman's name.
Denise?
So, that I took the segment from. I don't know your name. Radio Boston, WBUR. Every now and then, like she can pull guests that we will be able to pull, but some great content. And she did a story about 2 weeks ago. I'll Google the name during the audio, just so I can give you props. Comparing, contrasting the two creators of the statewide rent control ban, and then also after that, friends of the show, Mike Connolly and Nika, had like a response segment. I figured that we could do that response segment. So what we have for you now is the audio from the creators of the rent control. And now before we say this, because we might make fun of them, we might be a little mean. I don't know John and Denise. They could be incredible people. They could take out the trash of their neighbors. All of my criticism is on them as public figures and what their policy did to the greater Boston area.
And how they passed it.
What kind of challenges had there been, and why didn't those work?
Well, they tried at the local level to make reforms to rent control in Cambridge. The problem there is that 2/3 of the residents of Cambridge are tenants. So necessarily there was an absolute majority against reforming rent control at the local level. So to me, a statewide ballot, a statewide rule was the way to go.
All right, and I should have set that up better. So the question was, in 1994, when rent control, that ballot initiative was on it, there were only 3 cities throughout all of Massachusetts. Massachusetts has 351 cities and towns. There were only 3 cities that even had rent control: Boston, Cambridge, and Brookline. And the question was phrased to John, why was it that you just didn't try to get this passed at the local level? And did you hear what John's response to that was? Looking at you, Lauren.
What?
Were you listening to the audio
I was listening to it
our
last
producer took hours of his time and labor to set up for us?
Well, because at the local level, they didn't support it.
Correct. It's because 2/3 of the city, just like as it is today, are renters. And so the reason why you couldn't get it passed at the local level was that you had an initiative which benefited a supermajority of the people that lived in your city and town.
Yeah, and if you're trying to get something passed that the people in the towns it most affects don't support, the best way to go about doing that is go all over the state and make it a statewide issue.
Yes. And actually, Herb, can you go back to just started at 33 seconds? So that was why John didn't want to go at the local level, but I want everyone to hear what was John's reason. Why did he get behind this? Why did he want to champion rent control? Because, let's say, see, I didn't actually want you to listen to it last night. I wanted to let you guess live.
Sorry, I didn't pay much attention.
That's okay. Do you think John and Denise were renters or landlord owners?
They were absolutely landlords.
Yes. Well, it's funny. So Denise was, and we're going to get to Denise in a second. John actually wasn't a landlord. He was a property owner, but he had a very specific reason why he became one of the champions of the rent control.
That's how he first got involved with the issue.
For me, I was an owner-occupier of a condo that was supposed to be rented out under rent control. And at some point, the rent board started cracking down on condos that were in that situation that had missed a deadline for condo conversion to get out of rent control. There were several hundred, at least, units that had missed the deadline from the condo conversion, but they'd never cracked down and enforced this rule against owner occupancy.
Meaning that if you bought the unit while it was rent controlled and you weren't living in it, you couldn't then convert it to be something you could live in. It had to remain as a rent controlled unit.
That's right.
We
had to rent it out to a third party. So, for example, I had a $700 mortgage when I was living at it in this unit. If I had to rent it out to somebody else, I would have gotten like $130 in rent. So if the crackdown really affected people like me, there were 24 units in my building. Almost all of us were owner-occupiers, so we were all so-called condo criminals. Theoretically, we could have been evicted. I don't think anybody ever was. and we could have been subject to I think it was $100 a day fine. I don't think anybody ever actually received a fine. But
Okay.
Wait.
So this is tough, and that's why I wanted us to highlight this, because that was very easy just to kind of gloss over. You actually have to listen to what John said he did. So what John did was he bought a rent-controlled apartment. Now, if you were the owner, the rent-controlled apartments are there not for owners, but for the renters. So if you buy a rent-controlled apartment, you either need to A, rent it out, or B, you need to convert it to a condo.
Right.
Now, what John was doing was John is openly admitting John was breaking the law. John did not convert it into a condo. He wanted to stay where he was, and which is against the law.
Right.
And so that made John feel bad. And as John was saying, even though, again, he was in open violation of law, the police were not cracking down on this. Nobody went to prison. Nobody even got fined for breaking the
Right.
law.
They could have.
They could
Ooh.
have. But instead, John was in a position where rather than just saying, oh, I'm breaking the law, I should stop, you have a position where you can actually just change the law. And that's why I wanted to highlight this.
Right.
Because for most people in this country, when you break the law, especially if you're doing drug offenses or traffic, or if you live in a low-income community, people of color, indigenous populations, when you break the law, you're going to get the full extent of the law. You have
Right.
all of the resources of the state are going against you. But we have other classifications of people that when they break the law, they just say, oh, all right, well, let's just change the law. That's an easy way of getting around it.
Well, I guess if they have all that money they're saving on their was that really a $700 mortgage in Cambridge he's talking about?
Yes.
Oh my God.
And so
I can't even get $700 rent in Cambridge.
And I can't verify what he was saying when he said I have $700 in mortgage. So if I rented it out, I could only rent it at $150. A, I don't know if that's accurate. B, he is openly stating that he bought it with the intention of living in it, and he just illegally didn't convert it to a condo.
Right.
And all right, Herb, can you hop over to Denise's motivation now? 355.
Implement rent control.
That's correct.
Under those conditions.
Nobody in the right mind would go for the exception.
So, Denise, I want to bring you into this. Why were you initiating and getting so active in repealing rent control?
My husband and I purchased a rent-controlled property in North Cambridge, 4 units. We lived in one. We rented 3. And we understood when we bought it that it was rent-controlled. What we didn't understand is what that really meant. And after, a very short period of time, I realized we were in so far over our head just in terms of being able to properly care for our property and plan for our future.
Okay. A, Denise has the sweetest voice.
Oh my gosh.
She does sound like a very sweet, old grandmother.
So many old grandmothers would sign that bill.
Yes.
Or petition that she passed around.
So obviously, Denise's motivation is she is a landlord. I think it's 4 units, she said. So she lives in one with her family. She rents out the other 3. And so they bought this as what a lot of families do, what my family does. My uncle, I believe, now owns the duplex that my grandparents bought. And that is one of the major reasons of wealth disparity in this country is the white middle class was able to purchase homes. And
I wish my family had an apartment.
Frank's probably listening. Even though we're not going to kick out the nice lady who's been living there since I've been born anyway. So Denise bought this as an investment property, but her and her partner didn't know what it meant to have rent-controlled units. Meaning you can't just buy it and then jack up the rent without any limitations or caps on how much you can. So Denise's whole motivation was that this investment was not making her as much money as she wanted, which is why. And then I forgot to Google your name. I swear I'm going to do it. Can you go to 535?
It's back down again. It's convoluted.
Denise, there must have been critics at the time who said, we understand your capital repairs argument, but you also have 3 rental units, and if rent control goes away, you're just going to make a lot more money on the rents in those rental units. Did that figure into your calculus?
That's an argument that you always hear, and the reason, and there are so many reasons why this system is just a failed housing policy.
All right, Herb, you can actually just stop right there because I don't want to get distracted with all of the like bad reason she's about to say why it's a failed housing policy. Did you hear the long pause when asked?
That's an argument you always hear.
Which honestly, I would have I don't know Denise, but I would have so much more respect for people like Denise if you just said, absolutely, I bought this as an investment property
Right.
for myself and my family's future. This is going to make us more money, and that's why I'm doing it. I didn't
Right.
create the system. I'm just trying to live in it. I would have so much more respect for people if that's just how they talked. Instead, it's long pause. You don't for a moment want to recognize that what you're doing is going to cause real harm to the three families that are living in your rentals. So I'm just going to quickly pivot and explain why actually what I'm doing is the best thing you can and why this is really a good policy. Just be truthful. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, it's better than being a hypocrite.
Yeah,
So.
because then again, you get what she continues to do. Did you keep it where it was? All right. So now let's hear some of. You got it?
Oh, yeah. Hold on. Sorry.
That's okay. I don't know. Maybe like around 6.
Yeah.
We can hear Denise's long pause again because I do love it.
Very sweet.
That's an argument that you always hear. And, the reason, and there are so many reasons why this system is just a failed housing policy. What we were able to expose during the Question 9 campaign were the shortcomings of rent control, which included the deterioration of the housing stock, the disproportionate amount of state aid that went to other cities and towns, the overregulation of private property, the creation of a divisive community, an acrimonious political climate. It just went on and on and on. It was a failed housing policy.
She said too many things, and none of those are really good arguments that I want to actually spend too much time on.
I just want to say that I feel like the ban on rent control did all of the same things that she was saying that rent control did. Acrimonious political climate and...
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like,
also, the detour... I'm going to get into this after John. But one of the most common things you'll hear is that the reason we can't reinstate rent control is that it'll lower the amount of development, and we need more development. So when people use phrases like the deterioration of the housing stock, what they're saying is rent control keeps the amount of just housing units down because people don't want to invest here. I'm gonna let John, the next part, 1140, he fleshes it out in a very cute, young, I attended one macroeconomics class and I didn't really learn too much from it type of way, but I think that's going to be a better touch to him.
I think the answer to that is, first of all, I believe in the fairness of market economics in distributing housing fairly. But the way to help lower income people with housing is to create more housing. It's a supply and demand thing. There's downward pressure on increasing the supply, even though there's a great demand for housing in the Boston area. So I'm not an economist or anything, but I mean it's basic supply and demand. You need to increase the number of units in the Boston area to keep prices within range for low-income people. Otherwise, you have to...
Actually, wait. I'll let you finish, John. Otherwise...
So
okay.
What happens, I think some of the people you're talking about moved from Cambridge to Somerville. They then...
Okay, no, because I have to explain that point, because if you listen to Marty Walsh, you're going to hear that point. If you listen to Charlie Baker, you're going to hear that point. If you read the Boston Globe editorial board, you're going to hear that point. The most common thing that people say is that this is a simple economics. Did you ever take macroeconomics?
Yes.
Are you lying?
No. Why do you doubt me?
Because you looked very suspicious.
I mean, I don't want a pop quiz, but you know, yes, I took macro and microeconomics. I think just macro actually.
Okay.
But
one of the first things you learn in macroeconomics is the little supply and demand chart.
Right.
And that's if there's high demand and a low supply.
Right.
Prices go up. If you got too much supply and not enough demand, then the prices plummet. For some reason, this is the only thing anyone remembers from that class. I just roughly explained it in 17 seconds. What that assumes in housing, and the reason why this is a very common talking point, is that it assumes that all of the units we've built are filled, and so we need more. And if we created more, then that will lower the cost because now you're reaching the demand. But listen to what I just said. That assumes that all of the units we've created are actually filled. Would it surprise anyone listening to know that all of this development, all of these luxury towers, the seaport, downtown, Austin, Brighton, would it surprise anyone to know that we actually have a lot of vacancies and that those are all investment properties where no one is living?
No one would be surprised by that.
Okay. If you're tuning into Renters Radio, you shouldn't be. You are the elite of the elite. You know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But just to give you some more ammunition, Institute of Policy Studies, what they found was that 35% were owned by what are called LLCs, limited liability corporations, it's basic businesses, or trusts. And there is no documentation of who the owners are. Going even further to that, and for some reason, 40% are all located in Delaware. I know Delaware has like a lot of tax breaks. It's, Delaware, Connecticut, and oddly enough, South Dakota are three of like the like we always think of the Cayman Islands as like tax shelters. There's actually a lot in this country that people use. So Delaware, I know, is one of them. But one of the oddest things is that almost 80% don't use what's called a resident exemption. I'm going to get real wonky on everyone now.
Let's go.
Okay. 1914. To inspire or helping what were, of course, the white Americans at that time, to make sure they could afford housing, the federal government started to offer something which they do to this day, which is if you own your own house, you get a tax break.
Right.
You get a couple $1,000s monthly
Right.
savings, which, of course, socialists will say we really shouldn't be giving thousands of dollars to people who can't afford their homes. If we're going to give that money, maybe we should give it to people who can't afford their homes. But still to this day, if you are a homeowner, you are a part of a government program which subsidizes your standard of living, which gives you money. Just wanted you to know that. What they found, though, looking at all these luxury developments, was that over 80%, 8 out of every 10, 4 out of every 5, I'll do this fraction any way you want, nobody claims the exemption. What that means is that there is nobody actually physically living in the place as a home.
Right.
So 80%, again, we don't keep records of this purposefully, because if we did, then we would realize how inefficient the system is. But just doing this study, for 80%, 35% of which they could tell were from shell corporations or trusts, 8 out of every 10 of these luxury developments, there is nobody living there. Nobody's claiming the exemption.
Well, I mean, anybody who lives in this area can tell you that about these new luxury units that they're building.
Yes.
All over Cambridge, Austin, Brighton, Boston.
You could
Anybody
just
can
go for
tell
a
you.
walk at night and see if you can see any lights between the hours of
Yeah.
7 to 9.
Yeah.
So whenever you hear from anyone in office, from anyone from the BPDA, that we need to build more housing so we can have more housing stocks for reduced prices, I want you to tell them what I just told you. It is a complete lie. It is
Yeah.
all empty boxes. It is a handful of billionaires and hedge funds that have so much money that they can't even buy any more stock. So 60% of all assets are in real estate, and you just buy land.
However, if anyone has one and it has Wi-Fi and the utilities are turned on and wants to let me live there,
We have enough we have enough vacant units in this country that every single homeless person could be given to.
absolutely.
You
But a
could-
lot of them are in Detroit.
Yeah, sure. Go live in Detroit.
But a lot of them are in Boston, or a lot of them in Boston too. Do you think we could just?
Oh, absolutely.
We've got enough empty units to house everyone that's homeless in Boston.
Here's a phrase I want everyone to get used to: eminent domain. Eminent domain means the state, whenever it wants, can actually take your property.
Right.
Whenever it wants. We have to pay you, quote unquote, market value. What I say, what Jeremy Corbyn is doing over across the pond, as they call it, the government, all these vacant units that are owned by trusts. No, eminent domain. We're going to buy them. Public housing.
There you go.
That's all you.
That sounds good.
You could solve homelessness in an hour and a half. Just open the doors. Nobody's living there. It's
Right.
just, okay, you know what? Stay here for the night. Like we'll figure this out. We'll figure out who gets what. Just okay. Here you go. Here's a roof over your head. Nobody dies tonight. No one's gonna die in the cold.
Right. No one's gonna die in the street.
Solve it in an hour and a half, and we can all go home. And I can't pronounce this woman's name. Can you do that?
Tiziana Deering.
This interview was by Tiziana Deering.
I probably mispronounced it, but I did my
That was
best.
better than I would have done.
Okay.
Okay, that felt very good. But I do want to do one last point. We got to hear from Denise one more time.
Let's do it.
Can you go to 1010? Because this does get into the landlord mindset.
And to understand that. And then there was this, the fundamental unfairness of it all, that somehow on the backs of small property owners, people like myself and my husband, who, bought this for family. We had 2 kids. We're both working. We're trying to save money to put our kids through college. They were little at the time, but that was the goal. And somehow I was supporting, the people that were living in our units. But the people next door that had a 2-family home that was owner occupied, they were not subject to the same rules and regulations. So there was this fundamental
Okay. Did you catch what Denise was really mad about?
She was mad about being oppressed as a landlord.
So she began that segment as unfairness.
Right.
And she started by talking about how unfair it was that she had to subsidize in some way her renters. But then she quickly pivots and she says it's so unfair again. And then she brings up the landlord that lives next to her. And she says it is so unfair that she bought an investment property that doesn't have rent control. And my neighbor got to make more money than me.
Oh, boo-hoo.
That is the cause of this.
You have somewhere to live, lady.
That is the cause of this. It's that what I have, because you're making money. If you have a 4-unit place, even if it's rent control, you're still making money. The difference is you're not making as much as your neighbor. And that is what angers these people.
We are the Joneses.
Is that the person next door made a better investment because they knew what rent control was. Denise began this segment by saying that her and her partner didn't know what that was. So she begins it by saying she kind of made a bad investment.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, if you're doing it for money, just for all the landlords out there, we can have rent control and just don't buy rent control units to make money.
Yeah, it sounded like a lot of, actually both of them kept bringing up, I know when I was listening last night, it sounded like they just didn't think a lot of things through. And that was a lot of their problems with rent control was that there were regulations I didn't know about and I had to get approval to fix my thing. And I think a lot of times people have to get approval to do things to their house.
Yeah, as John was saying,
in general,
he
you
bought
just have to go and submit a thing to City Hall and then they tell you can do it. It's not that hard.
He didn't transfer it as a condo, which, again, if you're a certain type of person and you break the law, you're going to go spend 5 years in a box. But luckily, if you're John, you can just do a ballot initiative and change the law, and you can just keep living where you're living.
Yeah.
So, thank you, John and Denise. That felt very good.
You did a great job of breaking it down for me and for the listeners. Where are they now? Are they...
I mean, they just did that interview, and John and Denise, if you ever come across this, you are more than welcome to call on the show.
Call in right now, John and Denise.
We joke a lot here. I can be a little irritating, but I promise anyone who calls in who has different views than me, I will be very, very polite.
Yeah, and remember, we can take callers. I would love for somebody to call us and test it out. Our number is 872-810-2125. We have a Chicago area code. I don't know why, but that's the number for Renters Radio here. Give us a call. I actually want to take a quick break.
Ooh, can we?
So, good night, everyone.
All right, good night. Oh, so we don't have to do the sign-off thing.
Renters Radio.
So next week, we will be changing the show every week. We think that's the best marketing strategy.
Yeah, we're just going to change the name every week. You're going to have to look for us.
This is it. Renters Radio, signing off.
Yep, we changed everything. Patreon, subscribe, all the things.
Yes.
Like and subscribe, get alerts.
Oh my God, I just almost slipped as a bad organizer. You have to leave with an action item. If you can hear the sound of my voice, you have to give us 5 stars, 3 thumbs, whatever platforms we're on, and you find us, give us the most amount of things, write us a review, subscribe.
Right, and you know what? Hit us up on our new email is rentersradio@gmail.com. Send us your stories, send us your scoops.
We didn't get to get to any stories today.
Yeah, well, we'll be following up on stuff. I have a few things in the works. We're also on Twitter, at Renters Radio, Facebook at Renters Radio. We have a group, Renters Rising Radio. Name change still pending. We have Instagram at Renters Radio. It's all pretty redundant. Subscribe, heart, star, donate to our Patreon, Renters Radio. We're still figuring out that monetization stuff.
I'm totally going to find a way to get you all to give us money.
Capitalist in the streets. Thank you, sir.
Right.
Shout out to Herb.
Yeah, thanks, Herb.
Doing his best through all the technical difficulties today. Man of action, and let's do this again next week.